Welcome to Gamma Hydra Section 10. You are now in the neutral zone.
The neutral zone.
Gamma Hydra Section 10.
Hi, and welcome to the neutral zone. Today, my guest is Keith DeCandido. He's an author of Star Trek, and
among other things.
And he's visiting our sets. So, first of all, we'll do the 5-minute plug. What do you think?
There are not enough superlatives to encompass how wonderful this place is. I was here last year when we did our first Author's Day, and it was amazing then, and it's even more amazing now because you've added stuff since last year. You got the decompression chamber, you got the big thing in engineering, and it's just the bridge is a complete. I walk into this place and I'm 8 years old. You know, I've been literally watching Star Trek since birth. My parents watched it with me when I was a little kid in New York City, and to be able to walk around these sets, it's the most literal childhood dream come true.
Sure.
You know, and
it can be very emotional.
Yeah.
Well,
the emotion is mostly just utter giddiness, just like so. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm vibrating as I'm walking.
So you've obviously written. How many books have you written?
For Star Trek, more than a dozen. I'm not sure the exact number. I've written about 14, 15 novels, one coffee table book, a bunch of novellas, several comic books, and several pieces of short fiction.
Now, what out of Star Trek universe, which do you prefer? Is it TOS, TNG?
I don't have a specific preference. Most of the stuff I've done has been in the 24th century, just because that's where I wound up doing most of my work. I did a lot of stuff with the Klingons, and also with Federation and general galactic politics. Two of my best received novels were The Art of the Impossible, which was about a conflict between the Klingons and the Cardassians in the era between the original series and Next Generation. Mm-hmm. Another one was called Articles of the Federation, which was basically a Star Trek version of The West Wing. It was a year in the life of the Federation president.
Interesting.
Which took place in the year following Star Trek Nemesis. So it's right after the Romulan Senate got turned to pixie dust. And the person who turned them into pixie dust got blown up. So There's kind of a power vacuum in Romulus. That's one of a host of problems that a newly elected Federation president has to deal with.
Ah, interesting.
So,
it's an interesting angle. I never, but that's what great makes all this so good is that you can do anything you want.
Yeah.
So what got you into? I mean, you say you watched Star Trek since you were a child, so
yes.
That's why you're into it. But how did you get into the writing aspect of it?
They say it's who you know, and I happen to know one of the people involved with editing Star Trek fiction at the time my writing career got started. I've been friends with John Ordover from when he worked at Tor Books as an associate editor. He moved over to Simon & Schuster and became one of the Star Trek editors. And he didn't actually ask me to pitch him anything until after I'd already sold several novels. I'd already written five novels. And then John came to me and said, "Hey, how'd you like to pitch me a Star Trek book?" Because he knew I was a fan and knew I would be interested. Sure. I pitched him something. He hated it and rejected it. And then this was in 1999. He had just gotten in the script for What You Leave Behind, the last Deep Space Nine episode. Mm-hmm. And it said at the end that Worf was going off to become the Federation ambassador to the Klingon Empire. And he knew Worf was one of my two favorite characters. And he said, "Hey, how'd you like to write Worf's first adventure as an ambassador?" I said, "Sure!" So we worked out a plot, and that led to Diplomatic Implausibility, which was my first Trek novel.
So that brings me to my next question, because as someone who doesn't write, this has always been kind of I've always been fascinated with how you guys, how do you come up? Do you come up with an idea for a story, and then where do you take it from them? So you have this, so you want to write a Worf story. So how do you build from there?
With tie-in fiction in particular, you have to come up with the entire plot first, and that has to be approved by CBS/Paramount
so it's like
/Viacom/whatever. It's basically a description of the plot. It can be anywhere from 3 pages to 50 pages, depending on how detailed the author wants to get. And everybody has different styles of outline. And certain books require more detail. Like, my outline for Articles of the Federation was much more detailed because there were so many different things going on than it was for, say, one of my straight-up Klingon stories. I wrote 4 novels that took place on a Klingon ship. Those are a little more straightforward adventure stories, so those are shorter outlines.
Right.
But you have to write that first, the description of what happens in the book. That then goes to the licensing department, which these days is run by a guy named John Van Sitters, who is wonderful.
Yeah.
John
Incidentally,
and his predecessor, Paula
we have
Block.
to do the same thing even for these
Yes,
videos.
yes. And his predecessor was Paula Block, who was also wonderful. They're the only two people I've ever worked with. I'm sure other people can tell you stories about the people before Paula and John, but I didn't have to deal with any of that. I've just had to deal with them. They are both Star Trek fans who came to this job, who know the material, and who are very good at what they do. So Paula or John or whoever it is in licensing has to approve it. And this is true for all tie-ins. Anytime you're doing something in somebody else's universe, there is somebody at the property owner who has to approve it.
Sure.
If you're doing a Star Wars novel, there's a person at Lucas now at Disney, but who has to approve it. If you're doing I did a Farscape comic book and a Farscape novel that had to be approved by somebody at the Jim Henson Company.
Sure. Another great TV series.
I did a World of Warcraft novel that had to be had to be approved by the people at Blizzard, and so on.
Right.
So there's always somebody who has to approve it. Once the plot outline is approved, then you write the novel. So, and then that has to be approved.
Right. Sure.
And like with some licenses, it's very hands-on. Like Blizzard's a good example. I worked out my World of Warcraft and my StarCraft novels that I wrote for them in excruciating detail with Chris Metzen, who at the time was the person in charge of the storylines for both of them.
Right.
And we spent 2 hours on the phone in both cases going over what we wanted the story to be and throwing ideas at each other and so on. Other licensors are less hands-on. They just okay, that's fine, do that. No, don't do that. That's not so good. And others, will kibitz. Some will just rubber stamp it. It varies from project to project and license to license. So that's how that works. Sometimes it starts with the writer. Sometimes it starts with the editor. Articles of the Federation originally started with John Ordover, who just told me he wants me to write a Star Trek version of the West Wing, but we never got past that.
Right.
And then John left the company. Marco Palmieri wanted to do that as well, and then he and I worked out what the actual plot would be.
Interesting.
And then we ran it by Paula and John, and it got approved and so on and so forth.
So what do you have? What's on the horizon, or what are you working on? Anything you can let us in on? A little sneak peek? Or you're not giving any plots or anything, secrets away?
The tie-in work I'm doing. There's 2 projects I'm working on that I really can't talk about. I signed NDAs in both cases, so I can't.
I don't want to get. We don't want to get you any trouble.
One is going to be a series of novellas that are going to be released serially, and it's tying into a game, and they're going to be the stories are going to be released in 1,000-word installments. For 15,000-word novellas of stories taking place in the universe. They're designed to be read on your smartphone.
Oh, cool.
It's a game that's played on people's smartphones.
Right.
It's an app game, and it's a really cool project that I'm waiting for approval on the plots for that right now. And then I also have another tie-in novel that'll be out early next year. It's also a very cool novel that hopefully we'll be able to announce
Any
soon.
Star Trek stuff?
No, the only I have no Star Trek stuff currently planned.
Okay.
I'm doing a lot of my own original work as well. My Precinct series, which is a series of fantasy police procedurals, kind of Law and Order meets Lord of the Rings, or Dungeons and Dragnet, as one reviewer called it. I recently changed publishers with that book. The first 4 novels and the short story collection that I did have been reissued by eSpec Books, and I'm currently writing the 5th novel in the series, Mermaid Precinct. I'm working on that right now. That'll be out later this year. I'm launching a new urban fantasy series from Wordfire Press, featuring a nice Jewish boy from the Bronx who hunts monsters. And it's called The Furnace Sealed. It's an urban fantasy story. I've got another fantastical police procedural called Super City Cops, which is about cops in a city filled with superheroes.
Uh-huh.
So kind of The Wire meets the Avengers. And,
Interesting.
It's basically what the cops in Metropolis or Gotham City or Marvel's version of New York would have to deal with on a daily basis,
Sure.
but with my own original characters. It's a nightmare, basically. But it's fun. I enjoy doing those. I got 4 new novellas that Falstaff Books will be publishing next year. And those 2 tie-in books, and there's probably some other stuff I've forgotten about. But
You are a busy guy.
I have to be. If I don't...
I expected to say I got this book and that book coming out, and that was it, and we had this.
Yeah. On top of that, I'm also... the one way in which I am still doing Star Trek stuff is I've been writing for the pop culture website Tor.com,
Uh-huh.
in which I did detailed rewatches of Star Trek: The Next Generation, of Deep Space Nine, and of the original series. And I finished the original series, and now I'm doing a weekly rewatch of live-action movies based on superhero comics,
Wow.
which will keep me busy for a while. There's a lot of them.
Well, all right.
But I've also been reviewing each new episode of Star Trek Discovery for Tor.com as they've come out. So I reviewed each episode of the first season. When the next season debuts next year, I'll be doing that for them
Great.
as well.
Well, we're just about out of time, but I really want to thank you for coming in.
My
If
pleasure.
you're interested in Keith's book, you certainly can look you up, and he's got
You
a
can
lot
find
to
me
read.
online at DeCandido.net.
And that's all for this episode. Please subscribe and like us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Go to StarTrekTour.com for more information about tours, special events, and tickets.